was missing was any mention of her children. In context, the journals read like a chronicle of denial. The Mary who lived here at the hospital seemed to have recorded no memory or awareness of them at all. And the woman who lived as Mary Wagner, the woman Mary Constantine had become, could think of nothing but those children. The common thread as she had evolved was a lack of consciousness around Brendan, Ashley's, and Adam's murder. The A's and B's. I could only hypothesize at this point, but it seemed to me that Mary was on a crash course toward a fuller realization, and wreaking havoc along the way. Now that she was in custody again, the only person she could harm was herself. Still, if she was in fact moving toward the truth, I hated to think what might happen to her when she got there. Chapter 113. It was hard to tear myself away from Mary's journals, her words, her ideas, and her anger. For the first time it seemed possible to me, even probable, that she had actually committed the series of murders in L.A. When I looked at my watch, I was already half an hour late for a meeting with her lead therapist, Deborah Shapiro. Shit. I need to hustle over there. Dr. Shapiro was actually on her way out when I got to her office. I was full of apology. Shapiro stayed to speak with me, but was perched on the edge of a couch with her briefcase on her lap. Mary was my patient for 8 years, she told me before I even asked. How would you characterize her? Not as a killer, interestingly. I view the incident with her children as an aberration to the larger arena, if you will, of her mental illness. She's a very sick woman, but any violent impulses were subjugated a long time ago. That's part of what kept her here. She never moved through anything. How can you be sure? I asked Dr. Shapiro. Especially given what's happened. Maybe Mary wasn't the only person in denial around here. If I were testifying in court, I'd have to say I can't. Beyond that, though, I think 8 years of interaction is worth something, Dr. Cross. Don't you? I did think so, of course, but only if the therapist showed me some insight. What about her children? I asked. I didn't find any mention of them in her journals, but for the short time I've known Mary, they've been all she can think about. They're very much alive in her mind now. She's obsessed with them. Dr. Shapiro nodded while she looked at her watch. That's more difficult for me to reconcile. I could offer a theory, which is that maybe Mary's therapy was finally actualizing. The memory of those children was slowly bubbling up. As the children came into her consciousness, one way to avoid processing 20 years of repressed guilt all at once would be to keep the children alive, as you put it. It could explain what drove her to escape when she did, to get back to her life with them, which, to Mary's experience, is exactly what happened. And these murders in California? I was going very quickly on purpose. Dr. Shapiro fidgeted as though she might jump up and leave at any moment. She shrugged, clearly impatient with the interview. I wondered if her therapy sessions felt like this to her patients. I just don't see it. It's hard to know what might have happened to Mary once she left here, but as for the woman that I knew, she shook her head back and forth several times. The only part of the story that makes sense is Los Angeles. How so? I asked. There was some interest in her story a few years ago. Some movie people came and went. Mary permitted the interviews, but as a state's ward, she didn't have the autonomy to grant any farther-reaching permission. Eventually, they lost interest and went away. During her last couple of years here, I think they were the only visitors she had. Who? I took out my notebook, folded it open. I need to know more about this. Are there records of the visits? Anything. I don't actually recall any names, she said. And beyond that, I'm a bit uncomfortable with the level of disclosure here. I might refer you back to Dr. Blaisdell if you want more specific information. He'd be the one to release it. I wondered if she was feeling protective of her patient, or maybe just late for something on her social calendar. The clock said 5:46. I realized I might do better elsewhere, in which case I had to get going as well. I thanked Dr. Shapiro for her time and help and headed back to the administration building. I was running. Chapter 114. Still in all, I was feeling like a real cop again, and it didn't seem half bad to me. The wall clock in the administrative office said 5:52 when I slipped in. I smiled across the counter at a young woman with pink-streaked blonde hair and a lot of costume jewelry. She was draping a plastic cover over her typewriter. "Hi, I've got a really quick request for you. Really quick. I need it, though." "Can't it wait until tomorrow?" the woman asked, eyeing me up and down. "It can wait, right?" "Actually, no. I just spoke with Dr. Shapiro, and she asked me to run down here and catch you. I need to see the Women's Forensic Ward visitor's log for the last few years, specifically for Mary Constantine. It's really important. I wouldn't bother you otherwise." The woman picked up her phone. "Dr. Shapiro sent you?" "That's right. She just left for the day, but she told me this wouldn't be a problem." I held up my ID. "I'm with the FBI, Dr. Alex Cross. This is part of an ongoing murder investigation." She didn't hide her displeasure. "I just shut down the computer, and I have to pick up my daughter. I suppose I can get you the hard copy if you want." Without waiting for an answer, she disappeared into another room and came back with a small stack of 3-ring binders. "You can only stay as long as Beedsy's here." She waved to a woman in a goldfish bowl office at the back. Then she left without another word, to me or to Beedsy. The pages of the visitor's log were divided into columns. I worked from the back of the most recent book, looking for Mary's name under "Who Are You Here to See?" For 2 years' worth of entries, there was nothing at all. It was obvious how alone Mary Constantine had been in this place. Then, suddenly, a rash of names cropped up on the log. Here was the flurry of interest that Dr. Shapiro mentioned. It lasted over the course of about a month and a half. I slowed down and perused the visitors' names. Most were unfamiliar to me. One of them I recognized. Chapter 115. My cell phone and Vermont seemed to hate each other. Apparently, this was the land of no signal. I found a payphone instead, called Agent Page in Los Angeles, and had him patch in LAPD. A minute later, we had Maddox Fielding's office on the line, but no Fielding. What a surprise. "You know what?" I said to the nameless lieutenant on the line. "Screw it. Transfer us over to Detective Gene Galletta." "What's going on?" Page asked me again, while we were on hold with LAPD. Then I heard another voice on the line. "Gene Galletta? Is this Alex?" "Gene, it's Alex, all right. Carl Page from the LA Bureau office is on the line, too. I'm in Vermont. I think I have important news on the Mary Smith case." "I think I may have another connection for you. A murder in Vancouver," Gene said. "What are you doing all the way up in Vermont?" "Hold that thought about Vancouver. Please find Fielding, or do whatever you have to, but someone needs to pick up Michael Bell for questioning. Michael Bell, Marty Lowenstein Bell's husband." "What?" Gene sounded incredulous. Then Page swore, obviously muffling the receiver. I gave them a very quick rundown of my last 2 days up here, then finally the names on the visitor log at the state hospital. "He knows Mary Constantine. He's visited her here in Vermont before. Several times, actually." "And what? He's been setting her up? How would he even know she was in L.A.? "I don't know everything yet. Maybe she looked him up when she got there. Maybe they corresponded. If he wanted her story, it would have been worth something. I think he did want it, just not for a movie." "You think it was a cover? Maybe to kill his own wife?" That's a big-ass cover-up, Alex. Sure is. It's an incredible story, too. Paige, are you getting this? Got it. And I like it. Finally, something makes some sense to me. Good. Then do a direct cross-reference. Michael Bell and anyone else connected to this case. I wonder if he had a bigger agenda than just his wife. Find out anything you can, Surfer Boy. All we need now is enough to justify holding him once LAPD gets him into custody. Gene, listen, please. If I'm wrong, I'm wrong. I say figure it out later and get a cruiser over to Michael Bell's house, now. And Gene, what? Don't go over there by yourself. I'm pretty sure that Bell is our killer. Chapter 116. Suddenly, the whole case was on fire again. About 10 miles from the hospital, I pulled over at the first gas station I saw, an ancient Texaco with a flying A over the roof. A Ford F-150 pulled in after me, but the only other building in sight was a darkened sugar house in a field directly across the road. I could see a couple of Holsteins grazing in the field. I called Carl Page again from another payphone. I needed to hear what he'd found out about Michael Bell. At this late hour, catching a flight out of Burlington seemed unlikely. I wanted to stay updated all the same, and was concerned for Page and Gene Galetta. Who knew what Bell was up to in L.A.? "What have you got so far?" I asked him. "Amazing what you find when you look in the right place," he said. Before she died, Marty Lowenstein Bell had just sold her own show to HBO. She was hotter than a $50 pistol. On the other hand, Michael Bell's last 3 solo projects went nowhere. His only big successes had been with her, and it looked like she was checking out. She was divorcing him, Alex. They hadn't yet filed, but a friend of hers knew it was coming. What did you say to me once? Cha-ching? Yeah, and the hits keep coming. LAPD checked Bell's alibis all right, but they all revolved around his being seen at work, or occasionally at home. Alex, the alibis aren't going to hold up. And listen to this. Arnold Griner seriously trashed more than one of Bell's movies when he wrote for Variety. Griner actually called him Michael Bomb in one column, that kind of thing. Of course, in Griner's case, it might be justifiable homicide. Antonia Schiffman? She backed out of a project that Bell was financing himself last year. Apparently after she gave him a verbal promise, which seems to me next to nothing out here. The whole thing fell apart, and he lost $500,000 in development. I could hear the adrenaline in Page's voice. He was like a greyhound at the gate. "I'll bet anything there's more," he said. Bell's career was headed down the crapper, and he was going to bring everyone down with him. "Keep digging," I said. "Great work, too. Any more word from LAPD? Gene?" A cruiser went by the Bell house. No answer. Did they go inside? No, but they were pretty sure nobody was home. The house is under surveillance. All right, I'll call when I stop again. Probably out near the airport. Unfortunately, I think I'm stuck here for the night. I didn't want to spend the night in Vermont, especially now, but it didn't look as though I had much of a choice. I thought about stopping into the small store at the gas station, buying something awful like chocolate cupcakes or M&Ms with peanuts, but I mustered all of my willpower against it. God, I am impressive occasionally. I turned toward the rented car and started to walk with my head down against the wind. It was getting nippy up here. A few feet away from the car, I looked up and stopped dead in my tracks. I had company. James Truscott was sitting in the car's passenger seat. Chapter 117. This made no sense to me. Not at first, anyway. What the hell was Truscott doing here? Obviously, he'd followed me again. But why? I was seeing red as I yanked open the car door on his side. My mouth was open to start to yell, but nothing came out. Not a word. Truscott wasn't here to